So after the drawing is finished, then comes the wonderful task of flatting. And every comic book colorist knows the flatting phase, and I think a lot of illustration techniques also use this approach. That basically, um, what I do after the drawing is I fill all the shapes that need to be separated. Give me a second. Uh, that need to be separated. I fill them with individual colors, and um, the thing is that I have basically no file left in which the colors are still flat. Oh, no, no, I do have. I do. Oh, you're right. It's still here. Yeah. Okay, so this is actually very interesting from a workflow standpoint. Let's turn off the sketch. So this is almost what the illustration looks like when I'm ready with the flatting. So let's turn on the sketch again and let's get rid of the white layer here. Um, and this one, okay. So I have this drawing, and below the drawing, I just try to define which areas need to be separated in color. And this is normally at least the bigger background structures, and of course the characters. And as soon as I have them separated, um, back in the days, I used to paint directly on these flattened layers. But since the last two chapters, I have changed my coloring approach quite strongly. So maybe let's have as a comparison. Let's keep this open here for a moment. We can close this one, and we keep this one here too. It's also a recent illustration, and this one here is from chapter 5, so it's an older one. In these illustrations, you can see my layer palette here. Let's get rid of the sketch. In my older files, you won't find any flattened layers on their own, so to say. So no flat colors here, because I would take a layer, like example here, the female protagonist, and I would have this as a separated layer, and I would paint right on top of them. Maybe let's also take an example where we are closer to the characters, because this makes a difference for me. Let's go into panel artwork. Let's take chapter 6, for example. No, chapter 7 is better, I think. Let's take chapter 7, because there's a lot of dialogue between characters, and I want to find a nice example here. Yeah, let's for example, let's take this one here. So when characters are pretty small in the illustration, like in this case, so the characters don't take up a lot of space, I tend to have just one layer for each character, and I'm painting the local colors of them basically freehand. When the characters are closer to the camera, I have a folder for each character, and let's take the boy here, Jonas, in the foreground as an example. And I have layers for all the different parts of the body. So everything that has a distinct color or material gets its own layer. The eyes, the skin, the hair, the clothing, and all the stuff. The same is true for the background character here. And what you can see in the layer palette is that on all these different layers, I basically painted directly into the layer. So all the skin tones here of the foreground character are in this layer, and there's nothing. It's basically merged. And it's not only merged, I actually painted on this layer. So it could happen that I do some color correction at some point and then merge that color correction with this layer, but there's basically no flexibility. And what's also important, all the lighting is painted on the individual layers. So when I have shading here on the face, the shading is painted on this layer here only for the face. If I have shading in the hair, the shading is painted only for the hair. And this means I cannot make global adjustments, for example, to the shading of of the body parts. I could not say, okay, I want to make all the light sources brighter on the character, because this would mean to go through all the layers and change the lighting intensity, the contrast, for example, or the color balance, change it on every individual layer. And well, I could never do that. For the most time, I think the first 8 chapters of the Wormworld Saga, I worked in this style. And at some point, it occurred to me that I could do it more smartly. And I think this panel should be a good example for that. So we have the drawing here. And if I'm not mistaken, I can go into the layers here now, and just for a better effect, let me check what's actually here. All right, I think that should do the trick. So if I now turn off the sketch here, and I have to change the retouch layers. So this is what I end up in my current workflow, what I end up with the color flatting. So you can still see I have separated the different body parts. They all receive a flat color, and also I even put some local texturing into it, like these spots here. But and still here in the layer palette, you can see that all these elements go on separate layers. So I have, for each major color block, I still have separate layers. But what happens now is the lighting on these layers is done through layers on top of these flats that are global. So let's put on the first layer here. This is a layer that, if I put it in normal mode, looks like this. And as you can see, all the characters and even the background, everything is the shading of all these objects is in this one layer. And it is put in multiply mode over the whole scene. And that's the way these objects get all their shading. If I should now decide that this light needs to be stronger, I can just go into an adjustment, and maybe I should use a curve adjustment, and I can adjust the lighting or the contrast on this, and the lighting contrast on the whole scene is changed. So I can make a global adjustment now. And the next step is, one light source is not enough to light the scene. So here's another light source, which only incorporates the bluish light from the outside. And again, it is painted over the whole scene. In this case, if I show it in normal, it looks like this. It's basically some blue rim lights that light the scene. And I put it into the composition in add mode. Now the light is added to the other light. Another light source is added. This time warm light from the cauldron and from some background out of frame color source. Again, this is a light that affects the whole scene. You can see it on the characters. You can see it here on the foreground parts, on the props. And if I would decide that I need to change the color of this, so let's make a quick hue change here. This should not be red light. It should maybe be pink light, or violet or blue light or green light, whatever. I can change this at any time. And even if I decide that the intensity of this light isn't high enough or is too high, I can still make a global adjustment to dim down the light or to boost it really strongly. And these concepts are taken from what I learned from 3D graphics and from composing 3D graphics. Because in 3D graphics, you also like to render in different passes. You can render different light sources. You can render a diffuse path, a specular path, and stuff like that. And I just incorporated this philosophy of compositing light sources into my painting process. And since the last 2 chapters, I think since chapter 9, I'm exclusively using this approach and actually keep all these things editable in my file. So that's the reason why I could just open this panel illustration and I have all the information still here. And what I would then do is, when all my lights are the way I like it, I would then make maybe some final global adjustments, a little curve adjustment here, for example, and then there is a final retouch. So not all subtle little details can be divided into this light layers. It would be too much work to, put a little effect, like for example, this little rim light here. I think I put it into the retouch. This is when I created all the light sources on separate layers and then have the feeling, okay, I just need to fix a small detail here and over there. Again, to save time, I don't go into the individual light layers. I just make a global retouch over everything. This is basically the final touch um, of the painting process. And it's a little bit like making an overpaint. I get this result. Maybe this is the result of the light layers, and I tell myself, okay, this is an artwork. What would I want to change about this? And then I create my global retouch layer, and then I add a little bit of texture here. You can see if I turn it on and off, you can see what kind of stuff I added. A little bit of texture here and there. And here you can see that the color of the hair is not longer matching my retouch. So this hair originally was red, something like this, and now it matches the retouch again. So when I have the feeling that I'm missing some small highlights in the hair, I add it in the retouch and stuff like that. So at some point I decide, okay, enough with the compositing layers. Now let's just have a final overpaint layer just to save